During a telephone interview with a far-right MAGA Newsmax host, Donald Trump not only lied his ass off, but once again hinted that he might invoke the Insurrection Act in order to deploy the National Guard and military into U.S. cities after facing one legal defeat after another. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to play from this Newsmax interview with Trump conducted via telephone. Let's start with this one.
The Insurrection Act, is that going to be formally invoked? Is that a way to kind of get around all this opposition?
Well, it is a way to get around it. If we don't have to use it, I wouldn't use it. If you take a look at what's been going on in Portland, it's been going on for a long time, and that's insurrection. I mean, that's pure insurrection. And then you'll have a governor get up and say, there's absolutely nothing wrong. And you see these places are burning down, like in Chicago with Pritzker. They lose 5 a weekend, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11.
30.
It's crazy. And you know, like 35 are shot. You look at some of the bigger weekends, and they'll have 11 dead, 11 murdered, and 50 shot. And then he gets up on television and tells everyone how safe it is. It's not safe, and we'll make it safe. I can make it safe. We can.
So again, this is Trump hinting that he might invoke the Insurrection Act, which is something he entertained at the end of his first term during the 2020 election, the George Floyd protests, and actually to try to stop the peaceful transfer of power. There were serious considerations internally within the Trump Justice Department, Trump White House at the time, about invoking the Insurrection Act, basically to prevent Trump from leaving office. Now that he's back in power, he keeps flirting with it, especially in light of what happened this weekend, in which a Trump-appointed judge in Oregon slapped him down when he tried to deploy the Oregon National Guard against Portland, Oregon, based on a false set of claims. The judge was like, listen, you don't have literally unlimited ability to deploy the National Guard or the military. There are limits to your power. You have superseded these limits. You have surpassed these limits. You are offering nothing to substantiate your claims or to justify this extraordinary action. So no, you can't deploy the National Guard in Oregon to Portland. So then Trump tried to do it with the California National Guard and then the Texas National Guard. And that same Trump-appointed judge had to convene an emergency hearing. And it's like, whoa. Sure looks like you're trying to circumvent my order. So I'm saying you can't deploy any National Guard from any state into Portland, Oregon. Trump's trying to appeal that. But as he's facing these legal defeats from lower court judges, who many of whom are either conservative or appointed by Trump himself, he's now publicly floating. This is like the second time in 24 hours on live TV invoking the Insurrection Act, and this Newsmax host teed him up for it. And that would be yet another major escalation. And again, we're only 8 months into this administration with 3 more years to go. Pretty shocking. Here's another clip.
Pritzker on TV today says he doesn't want to call you because he thinks he'll have legal exposure if he calls you. He looks like he's ready to let Chicago burn, and you're not.
No, it's a great city, potentially a great city again, and they've got to fix it. They've got to do what I did in Washington, D.C., which is it's the same thing on a larger scale. Washington, D.C. is now so safe. The restaurants are booming, the whole place, nobody's being shot and killed. They come in from Iowa, Indiana, they come in from all over the country, and they end up getting a phone call, the parents, that their son was killed. Not anymore. It's a safe city. We arrested 1,700 career criminals. We got a lot of them out of the country, took them out. They're never coming back. And Chicago's safe. Now it's a really safe. It's gone from a very unsafe city to very safe. Now we're doing Memphis, and we're doing other things too.
So I just want to point out, because you've probably seen these clips go viral, ICE deployed a Black Hawk military helicopter into Washington, D.C., had federal agents rappel down from this Black Hawk helicopter. They zip-tied people, some of whom were naked children. I mean, they are treating it like it's a war against Chicago, the third biggest city in the United States. It's just a startling authoritarian escalation of force. No one is saying that Chicago is crime-free. Governor Pritzker is not making that claim. There are tragedies and murders which take place in every state in this country, not just in cities, but also in rural areas as well. The question is it so bad that you should send in the National Guard and the military? That is a once-in-a-lifetime, a once-in-a-generation, like we are on the precipice of literally collapsing as a country sort of emergency. And I'm sorry, we're just not there. And again, to people who say, well, you got to do what you got to do to fight crime. Okay, well, then again, for years we've been told that that logic doesn't work for automobile restrictions or gun legislation. We've been told, hey, listen, sorry, some death. I mean, Charlie Kirk famously said this: the Second Amendment is worth some gun crime, some gun murder, according to Charlie Kirk, the late Charlie Kirk, who tragically and ironically died from gun violence. But that was their logic. Well, the same logic applies here, doesn't it? Like we can't just deploy the National Guard and the United States military into the interior of the United States, which violates the fundamental principle of civilian law enforcement and keeping the military out of that shit, for the sake of crime. Like, it needs to be crime of an extraordinary, again, an existential level of crime, which I'm sorry, Chicago is not experiencing. So I just reject the premise every which way, but Trump really isn't interested in fighting crime. He's trying to flex power and test how, when, and where, and how easily he can send in the National Guard and the military to quell political dissent. Here's another clip.
Interview, very interesting. They interviewed people before and something, and I'm watching, and a woman said, I don't care who they bring in. People are being killed here. I just want it to stop. They can bring in whoever they want. People don't care. They want it to stop. And that's what we did. We brought in the National Guard into D.C., and it's now one of the safest. It went from a very unsafe city to one of the safest cities in the.
Let's say that's true. Again, I've told you this before. It's entirely possible, seems intuitively so, that if you have the military and the National Guard roaming the streets, you're probably less likely to get crime. Probably, right? That's what we see in military dictatorships, right? That's what we see in more blatantly, consistently authoritarian countries like El Salvador under Bukele, right? That's the sort of shit we see. So again, that's where the American people have to make a decision, right? Are we going to violate the principle of civilian law enforcement for the sake of safety? So any sort of crime, murder, shoplifting, whatever, let's just skip over the police and go straight to the National Guard or the military. Probably not a good idea, number one. Number two, let's say he's right about Washington, D.C. Let's say that he succeeded in Washington, D.C. in terms of dropping the crime rate. It's not zero, but let's pretend that it was. Why is the National Guard still there? If Washington, D.C. is so safe and this is supposed to be a temporary fix, which is what Trump assured us, well, no, listen, I'm not trying to occupy U.S. cities or anything like that. I'm just trying to stop crime. They're not going to be here forever. Then why are they still there if you accomplished your mission? Sure sounds like it is a military occupation of the interior of the United States. So that's another reason why Democrats don't trust Trump, and rightly so, when it comes to his deployment of the National Guard and the military. We have no reason to believe there's a limiting principle here or that it is a genuinely good faith, albeit mistaken, attempt to fight crime. It's just an authoritarian flex.
And we'll do it in other places that need it. We saved Los Angeles. I'll tell you, if you look, we did this a few months ago with Gavin Newsom in Los Angeles, and we saved it. That place, it would have burned to the ground. And the head police person in Los Angeles said, if they didn't do this, we wouldn't. They totally lost control. By the way, 2 weeks later, he was saying, no, they could have done it themselves. Is the old story.
So again, there's no evidence that the U.S. Marines or the National Guard needed to be deployed to Los Angeles or California in general in order to stop the very limited number of riots, limited in scope, scale, and egregiousness. You're talking about a couple of blocks that saw some civil unrest. That's it. Trump is wildly, wildly exaggerating, lying through his teeth about the scale and the scope of the violence in California, because again, that was the first test bed scenario. That was the first test case where he's like, okay, I'm going to use this as an excuse to not only deploy the National Guard, but active duty U.S. Marines. And it was later determined that that was unconstitutional. He shouldn't have done it. Of course, the courts were too slow to stop him at the time. So there you have it, folks. Donald Trump has suffered a string of, lower court defeats that may be overturned on appeal. Certainly the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court has been wildly, comically deferential, obsequious even to this president. But nevertheless, the fact that he's receiving any pushback, including from his own appointees, is causing him to, with increasing frequency on live TV, float the idea of invoking the Insurrection Act, which would be an exponential escalation of authoritarian might. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.